Hussein. Today I'm gonna teach you how to use test-driven development in short TDD cycle to derive our projects. First, we should know what the TDD cycle is. This is TDD cycle. This cycle has 3 steps: red, green, refactor. But it's not the end. It is iterative. When we refactor, we do go to red, green, and again refactor, red, green, refactor, and this is an iterative cycle. It never ends and should be applied in all the project's lifetime. Let me explain you what are each of these circles and these steps. First one is red. It tells us write a test that fails. Okay, we want to write a test. We want to write, we expect some code to do something. So we write it as a test. But it fails. Why? Because we are test first. And there is no code to test it. The code is after our test. The code will be written after our test. As soon as we write the test and it failed, we go complete and keep going in our production code, write just enough code to make that failing test pass, and then go back to our red test that is now green and complete it. And this is iterative. This movement between red and green is iterative. We keep doing this until our test will be fully passed, and if our test fully passes, our production code is complete. That piece of functionality is fully tested and does exactly what we wanted. And after this, we can refactor this code with confidence. We can refactor this code to make it more readable and maintainable. Okay, it might be confusing. Let's take a look at it in action. I have created an empty solution called Hero League. Imagine we have a hero class, has 3 properties: ID, name, and damage. And the damage is the amount, the damage that can hurt other people. This hero can hurt actually this hero is not going to hurt people, other heroes. Okay. I right click on my solution and add a new project. This is my test project. Why my test project? Because we are testers. We want to do TDD, so we don't write any code, any production code, until we first write the test for it. I call it hero league.domain.tests.unit. Unit because this project is going to have all unit tests for hero domain, and it's the test word is because this project is for just tests, nothing else. This hero league, the domain, is our main project that we are going to test it. Okay, let's create it. And Visual Studio is creating this project. Nice. It's been created. By default, Visual Studio uses MS test unit testing tools for Visual Studio. By default is MS test. We are not going to use it here. We just want to use xunit.net test framework. So we delete this using and this test case and test method, and delete all references. And in packages.config, there are 2 lines of packages for MS testing framework. We delete them, save all this project, And actually I want to delete this extra class. I don't need it. I want to create my own class. Okay, for instance, we should first install XUnit. I open up package manager console, write install dash package XUnit. For determine install. I'm wrong. Oh. For running XUnit tests in Visual Studio, we have to install XUnit package, the main package, and another one called XUnit runner.visual studio. I installed this package because Visual Studio by default doesn't understand that our test is in framework is XUnit. Visual Studio by default doesn't understand XUnit tests and doesn't understand the fact attribute. Here, in Test Explorer, Visual Studio can detect any XUnit test. If I install XUnit Runner Visual Studio package, Visual Studio is now able to detect them. So let's create a class called hero tests. Imagine that we have a hero object, hero class that I explained earlier. Now we want to first write its tests and go TDD. Public class hero tests, actually hero tests. I have to rename it. ReSharper allows me to rename it Ctrl+R. Let me refactor this and rename it to test, and it changed the file name actually. And ReSharper has another ability to delete extra and remove unused directives. Well, now my workspace is clean and I can focus on my tests. To write a test in XUnit framework, we have to have a fact attribute for our test in the top of our method. I say public void. What I'm going to test? I'm going to test the creation of this object, the construction of this object. So I say constructor should construct hero properly. Constructor should construct hero properly, and I block it arrange act assert. 3 blocks of unit testing: arrange, act, assert. Okay, I said we have a property. We now are imagining that we have a property called ID in our hero class. So I should configure my SUD. I say const long ID equals 1. This is expected value of ID. Const string name equals, for example, invoker, I don't know. Const long damage equals 30, for example. It can hurt other heroes 30 and their health will be decreased by 30. I want to act, so I say var hero equals new. How can I call the constructor of an object? I should new it hero, but there is no object called hero that takes ID, name, and damage. Well, at this point we are in red field. We don't have, this test is failing. It has compiler error, so if it fails, the compiler says the type or namespace hero could not be found. So we have to go to our production code, create this hero with a constructor that accepts ID, name, and damage, and see what will happen later. I come to my solution, I add a new project of type class library framework called hero league domain. I delete this extra class. I need to add a class called hero and remove a using directive. It's a public hero, and I have a constructor ctor is a C# snippet to create a constructor. ctor tab creates you an empty constructor. Long ID, long name, and I'm sorry, string name, and long damage is its arguments. So it should pass, but I have no reference to hero related domain. So in my test project, I right click in references here, right click add reference to just one project here, domain. My test project recognized hero, found it, and it is now passed. Let's look at it. I built my project. I built my project because Test Explorer needs to building the project to recognize all tests and detect them. Here in hero tests class, I have a test called constructor should construct hero properly. I right click on it and run click on run selected test, and it passes now. So I'm able now to continue completing my test. What I expect my code to do is to initialize ID, name, and damage property of hero class. Okay, so the ID1 should be equal to hero.id property. Okay, in XUnit, the equality is like this. Checking the equality is like this. Assert that equal the expected value. My expected value is the ID that I passed in hero constructor, and the actual value must be hero.id. But wait a minute, hero does not contain a definition for ID, and my test is now failing. If I run this test, it fails, you know, it has compiler error. Oh, stupid Visual Studio, but it have to fail. It didn't accept this change. It didn't see this. So I head back to my production code and create a new property. Let me delete this property and tell you a tip of Visual Studio. Prop is an snippet. Again, if I say prop tab, it creates an property for me. I want a property of type long, the name, ID. If I save it, head back to my code, to my test code, this code does not have a compiler error. But if I run this test, oh, take a look at it, it failed. What happened? I'm going to look at the information. It says test failed. Message. Expected is 1. What is expected? This is expected. ID is expected. But the actual is 0. What is the actual? Actual is ID. This is my ID and is actual value. Actual value of ID is the default value of long, because we didn't initialize it. We didn't give it a value, a valid value. And the default value of long is 0. So 1 is not equal to 0, and this test fails. We have a failing test. What we have to do is to go to our production code, write some code to pass that failing test. So what we have to do is to here we say id equals id. This line of code will pass our tests. Let's run our test and see what happens. And our test now passed. This is TDD cycle. We have to do the same thing for name and damage to ensure that our constructor works properly. Assert that equal name equals hero dot name, but name property does not exist yet. I head back to my code, production code, say string name, and this is now okay, doesn't have a compiler error. We say name equals name, and my test should be now passed again. Okay, it works, and they do the same thing for damage. Assert that equal damage hero dot damage. Yep, but damage does not exist yet. I say prop long damage. Okay, don't have any compiler. If we run this test, it should, oh sorry, I accidentally clicked on debug and it goes to debugging mode. Oh, what happened? Oh, please. Oh, I have a debugging error because the assert failed. The assert failed, it exited, and we see the result, but we had to run this selected test, and it should fail now, and it failed. It says that expected value is 30, but the actual value is 0 because the default value for long is 0. So I come here and write this code. I say damage equals damage, and if I run this test, it should now be passed, and it passed as expected. So that is TDD. We wrote a failing test here, and as soon as this test failed, we stop writing test. We go to our production code, write some production code to pass this test, to make this test pass, and if the test passed, we back to our test completed, and we do this cycle, do the red green until we head to the code base and the test base that we wanted, that we expected, the behavior of the code that we wanted to do. But still we have a refactor step that is very important for us, but we here just have one test and there's nothing to be refactor. That's it. If you like this video and learned something, subscribe my channel to see more videos.